Good evening, folks. I think we have some people that are still joining us. So maybe we'll just give this a couple of minutes while I get myself situated here. All right. Well, I do not want to waste too much time here. We've got a couple of great. Am I unmuted? Okay. We got a couple of great candidates for the position of the compliance officer, community liaison for the city of Portland in relation to our settlement agreement with the Department of Justice. My name is Stephanie Howard. I am the Mayor's Director of Community Safety. I use she, her pronouns, and I'll be helping to facilitate some of our questions tonight with our candidates and with the members of the public who are joining us. I did want to just give a little context and some overview of the process that we used to get here tonight. As Dr. Rosenbaum announced earlier this year, he is retiring. He has been the COCL for many years, and so understanding how long city processes take, we endeavored to pursue sort of a parallel track here while we continue to work in really positive negotiations with the Department of Justice and the amici regarding an independent monitor and what that could look like in our settlement agreement. We wanted to make sure that we did not have any kind of a period where there was not some monitoring happening. And so we began the search for a COCL team that would take over if we did not have an independent monitor agreement before Dr. Rosenbaum takes his well-earned retirement. So that's the process that we're here on tonight. In developing that process, we included stakeholders from our community groups related to policing in Portland, including PSEP, with our amici from the Mental Health Alliance, the Albina Ministerial Alliance, and with city council offices and other city stakeholders like members of PPB. That process reviewed proposals and narrowed down the field after interviews to their two candidates that we have here with us tonight, Dr. Tom Kristoff and Dr. Richard Rosenthal. So before I get to their introductions, I did want to also just overview the process we'll use tonight to engage and allow the public to engage with the candidates and their teams directly. We've got the Q&A function available for written questions, and we'll encourage that folks to use that so that we can keep track of, make sure that all the questions are answered. However, I do know that there were some folks who had some problems with the Q&A function at a recent community meeting that we had earlier this week. So if you are not seeing the Q&A, you should be able to raise your hand and we can call on you to ask a question of the candidates that way. So without further ado, I will hand it over. I think just going alphabetically, we'll start with Dr. Kristoff. Dr. Kristoff, if you could just give an introduction of yourself and your team members who are here, maybe speak a little bit about your experience and your interest in this position. That'd be great.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. My name is Dr. Tom Kristoff, and since 2015, I've had the pleasure of working on the compliance officer and community liaison team. Through that, I've become familiar with the city of Portland, the Portland Police Bureau, and the Portland community. As part of my work, I've also become deeply involved with each section of the settlement agreement, and I've helped shape the PPB's and the city's approaches to reform and operations towards complying with the terms of the settlement agreement. With the resignation of Dr. Rosenbaum, I was really drawn into stepping into this role, given my knowledge of the history and the evolution, as well as the current state of the settlement agreement with the Department of Justice. I've worked on this project in several capacities, starting as a project manager, an analyst, and working my way up to a decision maker. And I've developed or directly contributed to several of the tools and methodologies that PPB and the city currently use. And finally, as a result of this experience, I've built and maintained the trusted and meaningful relationship with each of the parties involved, with with the PPB, the city, the DOJ, the amici, the court, and more importantly, the community members. I'll introduce a couple of the team members that we have today. We've got the team that I'm bringing is really accomplishing kind of two primary goals. The first is I've retained a majority of the current COCOL team, some of which are here tonight. Amy Ruiz is here, and Shailene Morris are here. And these individuals, they bring kind of an unparalleled level of familiarity with the settlement agreement that it can't be matched. In addition, I've expanded the COCOL team to include several individuals that will fill existing gaps. Tonight as well, Ms. Monique Jenkins, Ms. Melissa Gutierrez, Ms. Julie Solomon, Lieutenant Tom Woodmansey, and I'm trying to think. I know Dr. Stephen Holt. I know was trying to get into the meeting, so I don't know if he's admitted yet, but if not, I will after this. And we've really expanded the team to include a community engagement team that's going to be led by Dr. Holt. And just kind of as a final remark, I really do want to acknowledge the opportunity that this process represents with the retirement of Dr. Rosenbaum and the initiation of a new COCOL selection process. It really provides an occasion, I think, for contemplation, reflection, and adjustment. We've allowed to have an expanded COCOL team, which will bring new ideas, new perspectives, and new ways of communicating with the monitoring process that will assist the city in reaching substantial compliance. This includes for PPB in the city, the renewed opportunity for working with COCOL in developing the monitoring plans, identifying outcome measures, with the Portland community members, really the opportunity for greater input with the CET. With that, I want to thank you all for the opportunity to be here tonight. And I look forward to hearing your questions and your comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Christoph. Dr. Rosenthal, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Richard Rosenthal. My interest in the project really stems from back in 2001 when I moved to Portland and I served as the first director of the Independent Police Review Division of the City Auditor's Office. Spent about 4.5 years in that job until I was hired away by the city and county of Denver to be their first police monitor. Served in that capacity for 7 years, and then again got headhunted and recruited away to the province of British Columbia, where I served as the first chief civilian director of the Independent Investigations Office of British Columbia, which conducted criminal investigations of police uses of deadly force. It's a type of model of oversight that simply did not exist in the United States until just recently with the creation of the Washington Office of Independent Investigations. When I decided to retire from that position, I decided to get my PhD in criminology. And my emphasis was, in fact, on consent decrees and police accountability. And in fact, my dissertation was on the Seattle consent decree, its implementation, and it's just a 667-page document that I'm sure you all would love to read if you just Google my name and Seattle consent decree, and you can see a rundown of histories and challenges of implementation for consent decrees throughout the years. I also serve as the independent police auditor in Pasadena, California, and I've served as a member of the Cleveland monitoring team for since 2016. I've been in charge of the accountability structures within that consent decree. So both external and internal accountability, the Office of Professional Standards, force investigations, internal investigations, and the like. I've also been working with the Seattle monitoring team, and I was hired by them to independently assess systemically the ability of their accountability triad, as they call it, to provide sustainable oversight. So I have a lot of experience in qualitative analysis, in police monitoring, in consent decree monitoring, and in accountability systems. And the reason really we decided to put in was I decided I wanted to give the city of Portland and the community an opportunity for a fresh eyes approach by experts in the field. I've got 3 other PhDs on my team, who I'll introduce in a moment, but to give a fresh perspective and frankly, a much smaller team perspective that would save substantial money for the city that they could instead spend on compliance instead of monitoring. One of the big issues that we've had with consent decrees throughout the country has been the cost of monitoring. I will note that the CNA proposal is extremely robust. They look like they've got a very talented team, but it is a team of 18 people and a cost of $748,000 compared to our team, which would be us four plus a local Portlander to be named later to work on the community outreach and engagement. So our plan or desire is to provide a much more focused look, really try and identify what's important, take a look, an environmental scan, find out what's working, what's not working, work with the city, the DOJ, and PSEP in identifying the key players, and then give the fresh eyes expert approach. And I'd actually ask if my team members just can give a really quick introduction on their own. And Stephanie, I'm hoping that's okay. Excellent. Just so that they can explain what they bring to the team. And let me start with maybe Dr. Joseph DeAngelis from University of Idaho.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joseph DeAngelis. I'm a criminologist, and educator, and associate professor at the University of Idaho. I'm on the team for a couple of different reasons. One is I bring sort of some strengths in research methodology and statistical methods in particular, and I've worked extensively with Richard Rosenthal for the last, almost the last 20 years on various different projects. So as an academic, I earned my PhD from New York University, and I've spent about half of my professional career working as a practitioner for police oversight agencies. My first job was to work as an analyst for the Independent Police Review Division, and in that capacity, I worked on implementing the case management, the sort of the data collection and analytic structures for the IPR from 2001 to 2004. Also engaged in a number of evaluation projects, data-driven, and especially quantitative evaluation projects at the time. After that, I worked as an academic at Ohio University, teaching criminology and research methods related courses. And then I went back to working as an analyst for the Denver's Office of the Independent Monitor, where I started out as an analyst and became their policy director, conducting data-driven evaluations of policies and practices for the Portland Police Bureau, or for the Denver Police Department and the Denver Sheriff's Office. Since that time, I took a job as an academic at the University of Idaho, where I teach classes in criminology and conduct research on issues relating to police oversight, as well as applied policy and program evaluations for different agencies.
Great. And Dr. DeAngelis really is our data person, so to speak. Also, Dr. Ajane Clemens from University of Denver is on our team. She's actually recently had to replace Bessie Scott, who just accepted a job this last week with the Office of Inspector General in Seattle. So she had to drop off for a while unless she can get approval for secondary employment. But Dr. Clemens has agreed to join us here tonight and just explain what she would bring to the team as well. Dr. Clemens.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you all. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. So Ajane Clemens, I'm a professor of public policy for the University of Denver. And prior to my life as an academic, I spent 10 years in government, either as a municipal official in oversight, where I met Richard Rosenthal for the city and county of Denver, working as a community relations ombudsman, and establishing relationships, doing outreach with the community, setting up our mediation program with community members and police officers to resolve hundreds of complaints in that fashion. And then I went to DC and worked as a policy director advising African-American state legislators across the country, and on a variety of policy issues, advising them before I went back to school for my PhD in public policy. And the entire time I've been focused on policing and the most helpful and harmful aspects of that relationship. And so a lot of my research has been certainly qualitative, but focused on going out to folks who are in the most economically distressed, most heavily policed communities, and understanding what people need to both be safe and feel safe. And so I've done that in Durham, North Carolina, and with young Black men between the ages of 18 and 29, as well as young Muslim men of Bangladeshi descent in East London. So I'm rolling out not only, of course, academic pieces, but policy focused pieces that will help the Durham Police Department, as well as the Metropolitan Police Department in London, to be able to implement some of the policies and the reforms that came about from folks on the ground. And at this point, I am joining a team, mixed methods team from University of Pennsylvania, and as well as Duke to evaluate the new program, relatively new program that Denver Police Department has rolled out, and how they change the way that they conduct non-fatal shootings. We'll be doing an independent impact evaluation of that. So I'm looking forward to bringing, my perspective as someone involved in government, but mostly as someone who really is able to, do outreach, to do engagement, and bring that very community-focused perspective. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Clemens. And last but not least is Dr. Randy DuPont, who created the Memphis Crisis Intervention Team model. And Randy, can you just give a brief explanation of what you're bringing to the team?
To see if I'm, okay, I'm unmuted now. Appreciate it. Thank you, Richard. I do appreciate that. Folks, it's a privilege to be here, and it's good to meet with so many of you in such a talented bunch. One of the reasons I've joined this team is because I've worked with Richard now for 5 years. And what I have been impressed with is his ability to handle challenging situations and to bring people together. He's doing the lead monitor in the Cleveland area for the area police accountability. My role is as a lead monitor in that area for behavioral health. I'm also the lead monitor in Baltimore for the same thing. And I've been privileged because in those jobs, in each case, the area that I've headed has been selected as the lead area in police reform for that particular monitoring ship. And I've been really pleased and honored about that. What I look forward to is that I've been impressed with what Portland has. It seems to have a lot of elements that I think are very impressive. It's trying to do some very innovative things in policing, and it seems to have a great deal of support, even from different elements, to be able to accomplish that. It does seem like there's a need to kind of make sure that there isn't any tendency for it to move in a different direction than forward. And I do think that would be a challenge that we would kind of welcome indeed. On a personal level, I've been honored. National Alliance of Mental Illness named me the Psychologist of the Year. John Jay College of Criminal Justice named me as the Criminologist of the Year. And in addition to the CIT International was named me as one of the founding fathers of the program. So I do appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it and hope we have a chance to be able to work with you all.
And just finally, I'd point out, again, we're looking to be really focused, identify what works and what doesn't work, to help the city get into compliance at the earliest opportunity, and to try and do so in really more of the Portland way, the way the settlement agreement was created, using PSEP as a key stakeholder, as well as the amicus parties, and try and get get Portland back over the line into substantial compliance. I'll finally point out we are going to be looking at this holistically. We are looking to determine that, in fact, the implementation has produced the desired outcomes in a sustainable way. That's, I think, what everyone is looking for as far as getting ultimate compliance with the settlement agreement and local control 100% back to the city and community of Portland. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Rosenthal. In spirit of fairness, Dr. Christoph, I'll offer for you, if you'd like to have any of your team members speak as well, we would welcome that.
No, absolutely. And I'll start off by saying I apologize. I did not see Janie Gullickson on the Zoom and I don't believe I had introduced her. But yeah, let's start off with Dr. Stephen Holt. I will let you go first, sir.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Stephen Holt. I am a native to the city of Portland. I own a consulting company called Tri Excellence. And in that capacity, I've had an incredible opportunity to be hands-on involved with Portland Police. I've been an equity trainer with the police department. In fact, I trained alongside who is now the chief of police. We trained together when Equity 101 for the city of Portland was being rolled out. I've been involved in community engagement. We specialize in creating opportunities to establish safe spaces for the marginalized, the voices that are often overlooked to be heard. And we know how to and guarantee that we can connect with and pull from and capture authentic impact and insight from those communities that have been historically left out. I could go down a laundry list of our history and our experience in the city of Portland, but I will say this. It's interesting to me that Dr. Rosenthal would highlight the amount of dollars and would use that as a leveraging point at this particular moment of engagement. Cheaper isn't always better. I think that the key is the ability to be effective and to connect and to gather the information that is absolutely necessary. Tri Excellence brings that expertise into the space. And having been a native Portlander and understanding the history of Portland policing with marginalized communities, knowing the absence of trust that exists and what is necessary to establish pathways to gain information and to take the time to build trust, to gather and involve those voices. That's the effort we bring into this space. So thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Dr. Amy, or I'm sorry, not Dr. Amy Ruiz.
Not a doctor. Thank you so much, though. I don't know, whatever title is conveyed on somebody who's been working on a project for many, many years. I've had multiple roles related to the settlement agreement over time, so bring a lot of institutional knowledge to the table. First helped Commissioner Amanda Fritz facilitate a group that chose the original COAB group, and then served in a project management support capacity to that team, and really was there through the highs and lows of that group's efforts. And then in my current role on the current COCL team, as things transitioned over to the PSEP model, my role has been to monitor the community engagement section of the settlement agreements and help with that piece of the reports. That often means connecting with PSEP members, checking in, seeing how things are going from their perspective, certainly observing meetings as well. And then also play a role across the team with helping get our reports out the door and making sure they're formatted and we've got all the acronyms in there. And we've taken feedback over the years, to make sure we've got section headers and things like that too. They're just make it as readable as possible because we know it is long. Thank you so much for having us.
I will introduce Ms. Monique Jenkins.
Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't allowed to mute or unmute at first. My apologies. My name is Monique Jenkins, and I'm an associate research analyst at the Center for Justice Research and Innovation within CNA. I've worked on multiple projects at CNA, providing training and technical assistance, conducting research, and supporting organizational reform in agencies and jurisdictions across the country. I currently serve as the project manager for 2 National Institute of Justice Awards. These include a multi-site randomized control trial of a field training officer intervention and the development of an offender level domestic terrorism database. And additionally, I've served as lead for reviews of community engagement practices for agencies such as Orlando and San Jose police departments. I also currently serve as an analyst for the independent monitoring team for Chicago's consent decree. So I support the supervision section of that settlement agreement, aiding the associate monitor in reviewing data, assessing compliance, and developing reports. And prior to working at CNA, I worked for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, to provide information about mental health and treatment options, NAMI's education and support programs, and other mental health resources. I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to be a part of this team, and if chosen, I would serve as the project coordinator, assisting Dr. Christoph. Thank you very much.
Ms. Janie Gullickson. I think, are we waiting for her to be able to come on mute?
Sorry, can you please say the name again?
Miss Janie Gullickson, Gullickson.
Wait.
We'll come back to you. I'll go to Miss Julie Solomon.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Janie, you're up next. Good evening, everyone. My name is Julie Solomon. I am a licensed clinical social worker by training. I have spent a number of years working at the intersection of criminal justice and behavioral health for a number of years in a community mental health center environment, and oversaw all of our justice and behavioral health programs. So I had the privilege of working, starting our crisis intervention team program and teaching law enforcement for a number of years there. And then worked into a jail diversion program, building out a 24/7, 365 crisis center for law enforcement drop-off. We opened a behavioral health, mental health court, and both at the felony level and at the misdemeanor level. And then also worked through some diversion efforts in not just in the jail, but also on our police department, sheriff's office side. So was honored and privileged to work in that capacity for many years, and then moved into working with police departments around the country and have been doing that for the last number of years as well. I'm privileged to work with a number of people that are on this call on the Chicago Police Department consent decree, and in that space, I'm the associate monitor over the crisis intervention section. So that's just a little bit about me. I hope to have an opportunity to meet you in person, and thank you. And Janie, hopefully you're up next.
Thank you, Julie. Thanks, everyone. I'm glad to be here this evening with you. I'm Janie Gullickson. Let's see, I first and foremost am a person in long-term recovery. And for me, that means I have not used substances, drank alcohol, or committed crimes since June 9th of 2008. And for me, that has recovery has afforded me a lot of things. I'm also a person who identifies as in mental health recovery as well, from a diagnosis that I don't choose to let limit me, but I use to give back to the community by sharing my experience where I can and bringing the experience of others and their lived experience. So I am also the executive director of the largest peer-run organization, I believe, in Oregon, the Mental Health and Addiction Association of Oregon. And we provide non-clinical peer services in the Portland metro area and across the state. Some other experience I would bring as part of the team is as being part of the lived experience community. I have built deep and lasting relationships and have hosted and facilitated many listening sessions, focus groups, and pathways to bring feedback from people with lived experience to decision makers and other types of bodies. That includes as a chair for many years and member of the Behavioral Health Unit Advisory Council for PPB. I, as a peer support specialist early on in my career, was part of a mental health law enforcement response. I have hosted and facilitated the peer panels and peer lived experience training for crisis intervention training with county and local law enforcement and enhanced crisis intervention training peer panel. I am currently also helping develop and part of the work group for the Mobile Crisis 988 curriculum development and training, and am part of a work group of the regarding civil commitment called Commitment to Change, another statewide group, and on aid and assist. But again, I think the biggest thing I bring is the lived experience and the connection and deep relationships I have with the community. Thank you.
I think, did that
You know,
cover everyone?
No, I know we had a call. Well, I'll ask, I'll ask, I know we've got to make it short. Did I just break up there?
It's breaking up a little bit for me. Yeah, looks like for everyone.
I will let Ms. Shailene Morris go first, Ms. Melissa Gutierrez go next, and then Lieutenant Woodmansey, and we can make them kind of quick introductions.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Shailene Morris. I am currently part of the COCO team right now. I came on board in October of 2021, so still relatively new to the team. So I think I have a good perspective of what's going on and happening in Portland, but also still a fresh eyes perspective, which I think is nice having this particular team assembled. Very quickly, my background, I started doing this work in Chicago with the Office of the Inspector General during that time, helping to stand up that office. Then transitioned over as the policy director for the Seattle Community Police Commission. I was there for a couple of years, and that was more of a community-centered approach to oversight, and it was really interesting, really valuable work. And now in my current role, I am the Chief of Audits and Evaluations for the City of Oakland Office of the Inspector General, and it's a brand new office. It's only been live for about a year and a half, and so we're going through a lot of growing pains and challenges, but doing great work. I've been excited and honored to work in Portland, and I hope to continue that.
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, Tom, yeah, you broke up there. I'll just do this quickly. Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Woodmansey. I am a principal advisor with CNA, and I've been with CNA for 7 years. I have worked with hundreds of police departments around the country on a variety of practices, including violence reduction, community policing, problem-oriented policing. I conduct assessments on the effectiveness of departments and the services that they provide to their communities. And I've been a liaison and subject matter expert for several large city police departments, including Milwaukee, New Orleans, Miami, Kansas City, and Birmingham. I also facilitate strategic planning workshops for police departments to outline what they're going to do in the next 3 to 5 years. And the unique part about this strategic planning is we involve a multitude of stakeholders and partners, including the community, who are not just there to listen, but to actually be at the table and be part of the decision-making process. I'm a retired police officer from Madison, Wisconsin, where I was our academy director, and I served half my career as a detective. And Madison has a national reputation for policing practice, best practices, and community engagement. And I think what I bring is my strength to relate to officers in the field, communicate with them directly, and understand them. So thank you, Tom.
and just want to get Ms. Malou.
There we go. Thank you. My name is Melissa Gutierrez, and I'm a senior research specialist at CNA within the Center for Justice and Research Innovation. I currently work on several projects focused on violence reduction with police departments. I also serve on the monitoring team for Chicago Police Department with Tom under the data section, or Dr. Christoph. Prior to CNA, I was at Arizona State University, where I worked at one of the research centers for 6 years, focused on program evaluation, as well as looking at homicide and suicide from a public health perspective and doing state surveillance.
I think that's the last team member. Is that right? Okay, great. And I can't tell if Dr. Christoph is frozen or I think he's frozen, maybe just for me. Nope.
I probably am. I apologize.
And Dr. Christoph, if it's helpful, if you, I think that we'd be more interested in hearing from you and consistently than seeing you. So I think feel comfortable to take your camera off and see if that helps. All right, so we don't have any questions from our attendees yet, but I have a couple of things that I'll throw out there to try to get some of the conversation going topically. Now that we have a good sense of who all of you are and how your teams work together. One question that I think our community will be really interested in hearing from both candidates is how you envision being able to have a local presence in Portland, since the leaders of your teams both live elsewhere. So I'll flip-flop on this one. Dr. Rosenthal, I'll start with you on that question.
Sure, and obviously I'm in the Vancouver, BC area, so I'm just a couple hour drive from Portland. Still have very close friends there who I'd stay in their basement. So to keep costs down, but I would anticipate being on the ground in Portland quite a bit, certainly, given, we've got this 1 year period to determine whether or not we can get the city into compliance, or whether potentially there needs to be actually a monitoring team put into place. We do intend to bring on somebody local from Portland to assist particularly in the community outreach and community engagement parts of it. I would actually, even if we are chosen, I'd be eager to speak to some of the local Portlanders who are with the CNA team to see if they wanted to join us. But the main point would be we'd also have, Dr. Clemens. Also, one of the reasons, not a good reason to choose her is she's in Denver. It's a direct flight, and she can help coordinate the work with whoever's on the ground in Portland. Dr. DeAngelis is also fairly close as well, being in Idaho. So we'd anticipate being able to get there without a lot of expense, spending a lot of time, but relying in large part on our local person in Portland, and obviously on the virtual meetings. We'd be there quarterly for meeting, at least at minimum, for meetings with all of the main stakeholders and amicus, and again, plan to be there I would plan to be there on a regular basis. I did forget to mention that although I've been on the Cleveland monitoring team now since 2016, if we did get this job, I would resign from that team because I would want to focus on Portland. And so the only other work I would be doing is the independent police auditor for Pasadena, California, and that is virtually all virtual. So I would have a lot of time to come on down and be there to meet with everyone personally.
Thanks, Dr. Rosenthal. Dr. Christoph, can you speak to how you would ensure having a local presence?
This works a bit better for everybody. Oh, the host just unmuted me, but I am getting feedback of that. Can everyone hear me?
It is still breaking up a good amount.
Even with the phone.
Well, yeah, a little bit.
I'm gonna try to call back in and see if that was in.
Great. And Dr. Christoph, I think why don't we try turning your camera off to see if that does help? I wish I had some elevator music for this moment while we sort out the technical difficulties.
You could start singing a tune for us.
I don't think anybody would enjoy that, so. I do want to give him time to answer the question, and I'm really excited because I see that we have a PSEP viewing party, and they've got a question in the chat for us after this question's been answered. So, folks, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we get you answers.
Apparently, Dr. Christoph can't unmute himself. He just texted that or said in the chat.
Oh.
Perhaps he wants a member of the local team to answer the question.
That'd probably be a good place maybe to start while we sort things out with Dr. Christoph.
Yeah, we can certainly get started. I know I'm one of the local members here. I lived in Portland since 2005. I was actually working for Mayor Sam Adams when he and Commissioner Dan Saltzman asked the Department of Justice to investigate the Portland Police Bureau. So I've been following along with this effort for many, many years. And I've lived here longer than that. So my office is based in the Rose Quarter area. So it makes it easy for me to go to in-person meetings whenever those might occur again in the future, or to meet with people individually as needed. And maybe go to Dr. Holt from there.
Real quick, can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I will very much apologize. I'm in a hotel from a conference. The internet is extremely unstable, and I now am well familiar with the concept of flop sweat. So I appreciate the moment to regain my connection. And thank you, Amy, for stepping in. And yes, Dr. Holt, I would have deferred to you as well, so I will allow you to step in too, sir.
Rapidly, we're here in Portland. We work in Portland and Vancouver, super involved in the Portland community, involved in engagement in a variety of investment projects that It's nestled in community engagement, community connectivity. So we're talking to all communities on a regular basis. So it's an easy and a simple path for us. And then I have relationships with several of the PSEP members already. So it's natural, it's simple, we're here.
All right, Taylor, are you able to allow Dr. Christoph to unmute himself?
I think I have that ability now.
Yeah.
Perfect. Dr. Christoph, we did hear from some of your team members about local presence, but if you wouldn't mind just giving us your take on that now that we can hear you, that'd be great.
Yes, ma'am. And I appreciate Amy and Dr. Holt stepping in. So they're correct that one of the things that we've done is expanded our team to particularly create the community engagement team to make sure that we have multiple people on the ground. In addition to Dr. Holt's team, we also have Ms. Janie Gullickson, who is on the ground. We have Kevin Fitz, Mr. Kevin Fitz, who is also on the ground, and they represent the mental health community. And so the big thing that we wanted to do is make sure that everybody who is impacted by the settlement agreement will be able to have that voice. As one of the appendices in our proposal, we provided the information on how the community engagement team will operate by going out, talking with the community, identifying the individual groups and stakeholders and persons who are most interested in reform, and making sure that we're keeping them up to date. And I know that with the current COCL team, we were able to do that in some respects through our engagement with the PSEP, but we didn't have a team. And I think to Dr. Holt's point before, with the expanded or with the additional money that we've included in our budget, a substantial majority of that is going to the community engagement team, making sure that we're grabbing and putting individuals in place to really make sure that the reforms are having the effect that they are designed to have, and that we're getting that feedback and that we're able to push that information out. Additionally, I know that with COVID, there has, travel has been impacted. But like I said, we've been doing this for 8 years, and I think that some of the community members can attest to the fact that I traveled to Portland very regularly. I was in Portland nearly once a month, at the very least, once a month. And I look forward to continuing that travel now that we've come out of the pandemic, now that people are traveling more, where people are more open to having in-person meetings. And it's something that I really look forward to being able to engage in once again after this kind of 3 years of traveling hiatus that the pandemic has put us through.
Thanks, Dr. Christoph. Great. I will move into the Q&A. We have a question from our PSEP viewing party. And here it is. A question for both candidates. How do you view the role of PSEP when it comes to advancing the goals of the settlement agreement? How would you engage PSEP and the community at large in your process? Please be specific. Dr. Christoph, let's start with you while we've got a good connection.
Yes. So the role of PSEP, the PSEP is a city organization. I think that that's one of the things that we've attempted to engage them, and we've been successful in engaging them and making sure that they understand our reports and that they have the opportunity. Again, the PSEP is a part of the community. Thank you, Dr. Holt. The PSEP is a part of the community, and it's one of those groups and stakeholders that we will need to engage in. And again, this has to go, I think, more than the current way that the PSEP is being engaged in terms of hearing our reports and being able to, provide comments. But those are once a quarter, and I think that there's the more opportunity to really work with them. And another thing with the PSEP that I know is that their responsibilities go outside of just the settlement agreement alone. So when we are talking about those efforts, I think we need to be able to see how those efforts do connect to the reforms under the settlement agreement and how we can work together. So in terms of how we would engage the community at large, Dr. Holden, I know that he did just have to step off because he is teaching a course. But Dr. Holt and the entire community engagement team with Ms. Gullickson and Mr. Fitz would identify those stakeholders through their current connections, through their current understandings, would bring them together, create a information distribution network, a information collection network, because it has to come back to us as well, and make sure that we're hearing everybody. And one of the things that I think that we really need to do is the current way that we engage the PSEP, and I think the community at large, is the quarterly reports, but those can be expensive. There's a lot of information there. What we need to do is take also a tailored and narrowed focus on topics of interest and topics of importance to the community, and really be able to dive deeper into those than I think that we currently do with the current structure. And so that's where I see engaging with the community at large, is identifying those topics and drilling down on them to such a degree that when we do all walk away from, when the Department of Justice leaves, that we all feel comfortable in the fact that there's been some real systems that have been set up, not just a check the box approach, which we've never taken anyways, but that the systems are set up for durable reforms. And so I think that's how we would engage the PSEP in the community at large.
Thank you. Dr. Rosenthal?
There we go. There are actually quite a number of ways I want to peel this onion. The first thing is, obviously, PSEP would be a key partner for us. We'd be coming in without a community engagement team, although we would have, in fact, all of us would be working in one way or another on community engagement. We would be, as we're coming in new, we would need to be relying on PSEP membership to consult with, to advise us. And I'll point out something. You know, I've worked with a lot of consent decrees now in Los Angeles. I was somewhat responsible for the consent decree because I uncovered the police scandal that resulted in this consent decree as a prosecutor at that point. I've worked on the Cleveland consent decree, I've worked on the Seattle consent decree, and I've studied all the consent decrees throughout the country. Portland is unique, and I must admit, I was always, when I was doing my research, I was excited about Portland. I was excited about the fact that Portland seemed to identify the importance of community engagement before any of us in the profession really truly understood what a key component it really was, and that simply professional overseers couldn't just do the job on their own and couldn't just issue reports to them and then expect all to go well. So we would expect PSEP to be a key partner working with us, identifying what's going right and what's going wrong, and figuring out the next steps, identifying those people within community that we need to reach out to, helping us in organizing forums as necessary, and to help us develop our outreach plan. So it's just a very, very much a key component of the work that we would do. And I'll just, there have been actually 2 references to reports at this point. And I will also point out that when I was in Portland, I think my first IPR report was something like 150 pages. And I brought that with me to Denver. And I still remember a member of my citizen oversight board in Denver telling me, ask me, well, why are your reports so long? And I said, well, the devil's in the detail and it's all about transparency. And he looked at me and said, no, it's not. When you have a report that's that long, it's no longer transparent. And so I've learned to really focus my reports, reduce them, try and identify what's really important. So I do think that you could expect on the whole shorter reports as we would move forward if we're selected on the team. And then I'd also want to just talk to the parties about even the frequency of the reports to determine whether the quarterly reporting is really helpful, or whether it would be better to go to semi-annual reporting so you could spend more time and effort on other areas of compliance.
Thank you, Dr. Rosenthal. Next question. Is each of the teams seeking to serve as the next COCL for Portland hoping to transition and ultimately become the court-appointed monitor for the DOJ settlement agreement? Excuse me, settlement agreement. I'll flip-flop. So Dr. Rosenthal, I'll let you take this one first, then we'll go to Dr. Christoph.
Well, I'm actually hoping, and one of the reasons we applied was to avoid there being a need for a court-appointed monitor, to avoid, in essence, giving up and saying we've got to go the route of all the other cities in the country with the independent monitoring team. And as I mentioned, the costs are extraordinary, and those costs can often, that money can often be better served in using it for other purposes, to include 3 or 4 full-time employees working within the city on compliance. So part of my goal here is to try and make this work and really try and engage the community. You use the community engagement to understand fully what we can do to get compliance. Ultimately, and actually, I think I might actually even ask, if that's okay, Stephanie, Dr. DuPont, to talk a little bit about, how we would go about trying to really engage community in trying to achieve compliance. And I can't remember, Dr. DuPont, I think that was something we spoke about before. Or would you like, or perhaps I should just keep it to myself and let Dr. Christoph go?
I think that's up to Stephanie. Stephanie?
I would say we'd like to get as many answers as we can tonight, so feel free to
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think that what Richard's pointing out is something we have learned, which is that basically community engagement is really a critical part of compliance as well. But that what does concern, I think, us looking as outsiders who are really coming and trying to say, this is a model that we were all very impressed with, and how can this model have the success that we know it can? And one of the issues that has concerned a bit is that it seems like sometimes that some of the engagement is working at cross purposes. So we are really convinced that we will be able to work and be able to bring that together, because that's our history. If you look at what's happened to us in our monitoring work individually, what we've been able to do is take diverse viewpoints and be able to find the common thread that makes a difference, and to integrate those with the institutions that exist. So I think that's kind of one of the critical elements there. And then finally, I do think that that it looks to me as though there's a need to try to understand, indeed, why compliance has moved in a different direction, and is it the case that everybody's working together, or are they working at odds? And I think that's really the biggest thing I would jump on.
And then lastly, Ms. Howard, I just want to apologize. I've been calling you Stephanie, and I didn't ask whether that was okay, so I apologize.
Please feel free. I am not a formal person, so please feel free.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Great. Dr. Christoph?
In response to the question, yes, if the settlement agreement does end up transitioning to a consent decree, and we move from a COCL/DOJ as the monitor approach to just a traditional court monitor, we would put in an application. And in some respects, I don't know that there would be much of a difference in terms of the work that we would do. So if you think back to 2019, from our reports and from our recommendations and technical assistance that we provided to the city and PPB, we had initially found that PPB had come into substantial compliance, that the city had come into substantial compliance. From our assessments, the Department of Justice made their own determinations of compliance and have largely agreed with us when we found that PPB and the city had come into substantial compliance. Similarly, after the 2020 protests, we were the first ones to identify that they were no longer complying with the settlement agreement, particularly with the use of force during the protest, with the accountability mechanisms after after misconduct had been identified by the community, by the COCL team, and by the Department of Justice. And we were the first entity to say that they were no longer in substantial compliance. Similarly, the Department of Justice, using our reports and our technical assistance and our recommendations, came out with their own reports, finding largely the same thing. So I think that we, while not acting as the Department of Justice and not acting as the monitor, we already have the experience of, in essence, acting in the same capacity, because the Department of Justice, as the monitor, has used our reports. So yes, we would be putting in an application to become the monitor with the knowledge and with the confidence that the work that we've been doing over the past 8 years has largely been reflected in the current monitors, who's the Department of Justice, their reports. And so I think that we have that confidence and that ability to serve as the monitor as well.
And Stefano, is it possible for me to give a quick response to that?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to point out, I really think the CNA proposal that you have before you is really a monitor proposal. I mean, I think if they were to be applying for monitor, for an independent monitor position, it would pretty much be identical. The costs, the personnel, and what have you. So if that is what the city wants and needs, and the city's happy with the President COCL team, then by all means, I'm not critical at all of the proposals they've made. I think it's actually quite robust. That being said, what we're trying to do is really kind of bring it back to where it was, I think, originally intended to be and what it was intended to be, and try and see if we can make that work.
Appreciate that. Dan, I know you had your hand up. Do you have a question, Dan? And Taylor, if we could make sure Dan can unmute himself.
Hello, can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Welcome,
Great.
Dan.
Good evening. I'm Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. I'm familiar with both candidates. I'm with a group called Portland Cop Watch that's been working here since 1992, and I know Dr. Rosenthal from when he was at IPR, and I know Dr. Christoph through the COCL's office. I also, just for context, am a member of the AMA Coalition for Justice and Police Reform Steering Committee, but I'm not speaking on their behalf tonight. And I'm also a member of the Police Accountability Commission that's designing the new oversight system, but I'm not speaking on their behalf tonight either. So I'll be clear about that. So I appreciated the answers that each of you gave about community engagement, because that is really important. And I think that was one of the things that has been not going great in terms of the DOJ agreement so far. So I wonder if I can ask each of you to address potential conflicts of interest. I know Dr. Rosenthal, you said you would step off of a job that you have now so you could spend time here. But I believe that Dr. Christoph's proposal came through the CNA, which is the Center for Naval Analysis. I never heard of it before. It sounds kind of like it has a military bent to it. And there sounds like there's a member of his team who used to be a member of one of the oversight boards that is actually being examined. And Dr. Rosenthal, of course, used to be with IPR, and one of your team members also be with IPR. So is there a way for you to address those potential conflicts of interest of having been part of a system that you're trying to analyze? Thank you.
Why don't we start with Dr. Christoph on that one?
Sure. And Dan, can you, the member of our team who you said was currently a part of a system that's being analyzed, I didn't quite understand that.
I said they previously were. I didn't want to name names, but it's somebody who was announced themselves as having been on a committee that is part of the DOJ agreement that is now going to be part of your team, apparently. So, yeah. You want me to be more specific than that?
No, I understand you, sir. I don't think that there's a conflict of interest because we've been able to separate those individuals out. And I believe that the individual that you're talking with would not have any oversight ability or any compliance assessment role with respect to that committee. I know that we're going to be using that person as a subject matter expert in crisis, in mental health crisis and mental health. And so I don't think that there's going to be a conflict with respect to that. All of our other members of our team, there wouldn't be any type of conflict of interest. And I think that we're actually bringing in people who have that firsthand experience with the systems that they would be evaluating, but who wouldn't have any conflict with the current system that's being evaluated in Portland.
Okay, Dr. Rosenthal, if you speak to the question.
Sure, and yeah, and hi Dan, long time no see. It's been, wow, I think I left Portland in 2005, and the IPR is a much different place than it was when I left it. In fact, one of the reasons I left it was because when I was hired by Denver, they originally consulted with me on the creation of their program, and the way I like to describe it is I told them the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Portland program. They took the good, they got rid of the bad, and they prettied up the ugly. And so I decided to head off to Denver to try and see how well that type of program would work, and it was highly successful. But the IPR is clearly, it's on its way out, obviously, and you as a member of the Police Accountability Commission are going to be part of seeing what new oversight looks like. I can actually tell you I'm very excited about just watching and even providing assistance in that regard. And it is certainly part of the the addendum to the settlement agreement to ensure that Portland gets there. It's an exciting new experiment and oversight that you guys are working with. It's obviously a challenge, which is one of the reasons it's taken quite a long time for you to to continue to work and figure out what exactly that's going to look like. But the reality is, IPR is a temporary entity at this point. Since the time I left IPR, I obviously have had engagements with so many other agents and organizations and what have you, that it's not who I am at this point. And I think I'm in a really good position to even objectively evaluate its strengths and its weaknesses. I hope that answers your question.
Stephanie, can I step in? Dan, I wanted to give you a response in terms of CNA. So CNA, the company does stand for the Center for Naval Analysis, and that's the broader company name just because that's where the company had started off. However, the center that I work for within CNA is the Center for Justice Research Innovation, and that doesn't have the connection to the military as the broader CNA company does. So the JRI, the Center for Justice Research Innovation, we do a number of things related to law enforcement. We specialize in research, training, technical assistance, critical incident reviews, and just kind of overall operational and management assessments and solutions. So while the broader company CNA that's where its origins come from, the JRI is a much more national leader in terms of policing specifically.
Thank you both. Dan, did that answer your questions?
Yeah, I appreciate the answers, and thank you, and good to see you too, Dr. Rosenthal.
Thank you. We don't have another question yet from our attendees, so I'll throw one in there. I think there has been a lot of discussion tonight about, where things are, where they have been. I'm interested to hear from each candidate. What do you, from your, experience or review of the state of things in Portland right now, what do you think is working well, and what might you change if you were to be selected? And we'll start with Dr. Rosenthal on that.
Sure, I think as I've been hearing and reading, the community engagement portion has been a challenge. I know, as I said, I was always very disappointed at the failure of the original committee that was intended to really be an essential part of implementation. So that's a key factor. The parts that obviously haven't worked well is all you've got to do is look at the addendum to the settlement agreement. and the areas where DOJ has found, the city not to be in compliance. And that's the area we would focus on, obviously, first and foremost, is the areas, I think there are 5 paragraphs out of 8 of the addendum where the city is only in partial compliance. And that is something that needs to change. We need to get the city over the hoop on that. And then obviously we've got the issues with use of force, the early intervention system. By the way, Dr. DeAngelis is an expert in the creation implementation of early intervention systems. Accountability is my area of expertise, and we've had issues, obviously, with accountability. And then even, the DOJ has specifically identified 2 paragraphs that they believe the city's not in compliance, where the COCL or COCL has said that they are. And obviously we have to pay attention to those as well, as DOJ is an essential stakeholder in all this. So really, my focus would be that, and I've worked on these monitoring teams before with the ultimate goal of achieving compliance. And so it's really twofold. One is we're going to pay attention to those areas where there's not full compliance, meet with the parties, meet with the community, figure out where we can find, as Dr. DuPont said, the places where people can agree and move them forward in that regard. And then the key part is this idea of making sure the settlement agreement is producing the desired outcomes in a sustainable way. And I will say, I'm actually quoting Mr. Handelman on that. It's not about just checking the boxes. It is about a holistic look at how things are working so that we can have effective and constitutional policing in the city of Portland. And so that's sort of my focus. Again, we're a small team. We really would have to focus our efforts, figure out what's important, what's not, focus on what is important. And the goal is to make this, COCL concept to actually show that it can work, so that it can be used in other cities in the future.
Thank you. Dr. Christoph?
Yes, ma'am. So I think one of the things that we've seen really work, and I think that this has been recognized by the COCL team for a while, and as well as been recognized by DOJ, is the city's crisis response model. When you look at the city's crisis response model, with all officers receiving 40 hours of crisis intervention training, and the enhanced crisis intervention team with the additional 40 hours, and then you add in the behavioral health response team, you add in the service coordination team, and I know that Portland Street Response, they're going through some growing pains, but there's a new system now with them being able to take calls that traditionally would have gone to Portland police officers. I think that is something that we've long recognized, and DOJ has long recognized as a strength of Portland. And not only DOJ, the lawyers in this case, but DOJ writ large has recognized the model. And has put that out to other agencies as something to be emulated. Now, I understand that there's concerns and issues with individual uses of force against persons in mental health crisis. Mr. Handelman, I know that you and I have talked about that several times in terms of high-profile uses of force. However, as an overall model, I think that that's probably one of the biggest strengths that we've seen occur in the last 8 years. Where we need to go and where we need to bolster, I think it comes down to supervision. As we had put into our last report, we identified cases where the use of force were not in violation of the Graham standard. They didn't appear to violate policy in terms of the actual use of force, but where issues weren't caught by supervisors. Dr. Rosenthal, you had talked about the additional remedies. One of the additional remedies is body-worn cameras, which is one of the best supervisory tools that we have at our disposal to be able to see the real-world interactions that officers are having on the street. Similar with our comments on EIS and the ability to identify officers, but then have those supervisory conversations. And that's, I think, one of the issues that we've talked about and pointed out, as well as supervisory investigations with the accountability system. And then also, I talked about EIS and use of force, but also the force inspector being able to identify, again, not violations of policy, but those lawful but awful uses of force that need to be sent back to the supervisors to be able to say, the officer didn't necessarily do anything wrong here, but the officer could have improved in A, B, and C ways, and be able to have those conversations. I think that that's something that we've pointed out where supervisors aren't always doing that. And that, to me, really, the entire accountability system stems from good supervision. The entire force review process with the FDCRs and the after action reports, that stems from a good supervisory process. EIS, and again, with the additional remedies, one of the additional remedies is the review, the paragraph 192 investigation that IPR is doing. A lot of that also comes from supervision, where something wasn't translated down the chain of command during the protest. That comes back to supervision. So I think we've got some really good policies in place. I think that the training, there's been a lot of good training. However, we need to see it put onto the street and operationalized. And if an officer makes a mistake, even if that mistake doesn't violate policy, that mistake can be addressed by supervisors. And I think, we've commented on the hesitancy to do so, and I know that DOJ has commented on the hesitancy to do so. And that's where I think we really need to focus our efforts going forward, is making sure supervisors are supervising.
Great. All right, we've got another question from the PSUP viewing party. The question is, how do you both view the role of anonymous contact information in reaching a more complete picture of community perspective? In your own community engagement plans, how will you incorporate anonymous contact methodologies? Dr. Christoph, I think it's your turn to go first, so I'll hand it over.
Yes, ma'am. We see anonymous contact surveys as that real world outcome. And I talked about body worn cameras before, of being able to observe the interactions from supervisors. But that's not community policing necessarily. The supervisors can look at that body worn camera, and they can discuss it from a tactical standpoint. They can discuss it from a procedural justice standpoint, but legitimacy in the eyes of the community, it comes from the perspective of the community. So we need to be able to see whether community members feel like they are being policed in the way that they want to be policed. That is the essence of community policing, and that is something that we've talked about since day one. Even prior to Dr. Rosenbaum becoming this COCL, we had conducted a contact survey in Portland. And I remember flying out to Portland to present the results of that contact survey. So we've done it in Portland before. We have found overall positive experiences by community members. But again, that was 10 years ago. Things have changed in the last 10 years. We need to have a better understanding now of how community members feel that they are being policed. And some of that, obviously is through the community engagement team, but it doesn't get to the everyday interactions that police are having. It doesn't get to the perceptions of the community members for the specific, interactions that they've had. And while I think that like I said, if you have that individualized contact, and you wouldn't couple it, you wouldn't couple those surveys with the body worn cameras, but the summary of both of those, the aggregate effect of both of those, of being able to see how officers are treating individuals on the street, that to me is important for for the outcome assessments. Dr. Rosenthal has said several times, we need to look at the outcomes, and we have, the COCO team has looked at the data, but we don't have that contact survey data. We don't have that body-worn camera data. And that to me is one of are the more important outcomes than just the summary data that's available to the COCO team at the moment.
Thanks, Dr. Christoph. Dr. Rosenthal?
Sure, and Dr. Christoph kind of answered the question, then went on to another question that wasn't asked. So I'll just hit the question that wasn't asked, which is body-worn camera issues. Obviously, that is, I worked for years without body-worn cameras and had to accept that, 60% of community complaints were, insufficient evidence because we couldn't prove one way or the other what happened. And the creation, implementation of body-worn camera technology has changed the landscape in that regard. And it's very important to bring it to bring it to Portland. The Cleveland already has it. I've been working with them with their technology. Pasadena has, I've been working with them. Seattle has, I've been working with them. And it does, it changes the landscape completely. Now, as to the actual question about the role of anonymous contact information, first I'll point out that, from way back when, early 2000s, I advocated in favor of anonymous complaints being accepted, considered, evaluated. And in fact, interestingly enough, the biggest case that we had in Portland when I was there was as the result of an anonymous complaint. It ended up turning out it was actually a police sergeant who made an anonymous complaint about officers who were involved in an off-duty incident where they assaulted somebody, and the two officers ended up going to prison. And there were quite a few other officers and supervisors who were disciplined as a result. And that was all based upon an anonymous complaint. So very important. One of the things that I do in my research, and frankly, I'm sure Dr. Christoph has done as well, we all have, is also promises of confidentiality and anonymity. That is just a common thing that you've got to do in order so that people can feel comfortable sharing their honest impression of what is going on, what's happened, and what have you. So it's not just about individual complaints. It's not just about the body-worn cameras. And by the way, the new technologies that they're developing to actually identify and use artificial intelligence to look through body-worn camera footage in order to identify particular issues of concern, to include profanity. Inappropriate use of profanity by officers is also a wonderful tool that could be used in the future if Portland would just implement the body-worn camera systems. But as to the anonymity, yes, I would be relying on Dr. DeAngelis to make sure that we've got the capacity to take anonymous complaints. Obviously, you can do that over the phone as well, over a toll-free phone line. We'd obviously make sure that it's clear that not only do we take anonymous comments, but that if you want to contact us, and sometimes it's just more robust and fulsome to get that person's input, knowing who they are and the experiences that they've had, and in an identifiable way. But again, ensuring that those people's identities are kept confidential if that's what they want.
Thank you. Next question we have, also from our PSEP viewing party. Describe concretely how you plan to balance the need to work cooperatively with PPB, especially in one-to-one relationships with individual PPB staff, with the need to be able to objectively evaluate PPB's actual compliance. We'll start with you, Dr. Rosenthal.
And I'll just point out, that's what I do. That's what I've had to do for the last 20 years. You can't be successful as a municipal monitor without figuring out how to work collaboratively and cooperatively with the agency, while at the same time holding them accountable if there are failures. So, anyone reading any of the reports I issue, I actually just issued about 2 weeks ago an assessment of use of force investigations by the Pasadena Police Department, and it's on the website of the Community Police Oversight Commission for Pasadena. So, assessment of use of force investigations by Pasadena Police Department. And what you can see there is that where I found that the department was doing well, I acknowledged it, and where they were doing poorly, I identified it and looked for solutions. So I always try and give the department or the bureau, the police bureau, an opportunity to move forward in a healthy way. And oftentimes I'll step back and let them take the credit if they're doing something well. But at the same time, it's really, it's an issue of just understanding roles, goals, processes, and what have you. They understand what my role is. I've always promised all departments I work with, I always say, I'll never sandbag them. They'll see me coming. They'll have the opportunity to come with me, get out of my way, or to at least be prepared to answer what criticisms I may have. So it is extremely important to develop those relationships, to develop, ensure that there's trust, that they have safe places to also state their feelings just as any member of the community might. But at the same time, we have a role. We have to honestly and accurately report on compliance and whether or not we believe that in fact the Bureau can provide or is providing sustainably constitutional policing in these important areas.
Thank you. Dr. Christoph?
I'm not sure who at the PISA viewing party put this question in, but I do want to say thank you because this is an extremely good question and it's an extremely important question. So we do need to work collaboratively with PPB. And I've said this before, PPB is only one entity that we need to work collaboratively with. We need to work collaboratively with the city. The COPL needs to work collaboratively with DOJ, the amici, and the community. So it goes beyond PPB, but with particular respect to PPB, the issue of collaboration is so important because, like I said before, at some point the Department of Justice is going to leave. At some point, PPB needs to own the reforms that are there. And when you work collaboratively with them, you create the concept of buy-in. And this is something that, the conference that I'm currently at now, we just did a presentation on EIS and the importance of gaining buy-in to create a successful EIS program. And it's no different than with any of the other reforms that we need to do, is that if PPB believes in the reforms that are happening, believes in the legitimacy of the reforms that are happening, they will internalize them, they will make them their own, and then when DOJ leaves, they will continue them. We've had this, we've consistently had this back and forth and concern about checking the box. And I think some of that comes from the sense that the reforms are being put upon PPB. And that's not to say that that's happened across the 8 years. I think we've seen some really good instances of collaboration where we've taken the settlement agreement language, we've worked with the Bureau, as well as the community, to make sure that the language that was written by Department of Justice lawyers in Washington, that it fits with community, and that it fits with the Portland way. And that's something that I've learned across these 8 years is that Portland way. So when we work collaboratively with them, we've gotten PPB to accept the reforms. And that's really been the most important part of that. And that is exactly how I would continue working collaboratively with the department. And I don't think that necessarily conflicts with being able to objectively evaluate the actual compliance. The settlement agreement has not only language, but intent. And I know that there's been a couple of times, the paragraph 99 says Portland will implement a Memphis model. And from what I've learned, and from my experiences with Dr. DuPont in the University of Memphis, where I was his grad student, the Memphis model it argues for that training of all officers, but that the specialized response comes from those specially trained officers. Currently, the Portland Police Bureau has a modified Memphis model. And I know that we spend a lot of time talking about, is Portland's model acceptable in light of the specific text of the settlement agreement. And ultimately, we agreed. We asked PPB to conduct an assessment of their model. We saw that outcomes for lower priority, for lack of a better term, lower priority mental health calls, that there was no difference across CIT officers and ECIT officers. And we were able to work effectively and collaboratively with the PPB to gain that compliance. That did not impact our ability to objectively assess their compliance. It actually allowed us to create something that works for Portland, despite the specific language of the settlement agreement. And so that's something that I would continue bringing on, in the future.
Thanks, Dr. Christoph. Another question that has kind of come up in discussing the role of the COCL and this position is how candidates would distinguish between compliance and technical assistance and how that would be communicated. And so Dr. Christoph, I'll start with you if you could take a swing at that question.
Sure. So compliance is with like I said, there's specific language of the settlement agreement. So there's text and intent. So I know one of the things that we have done is really tried to highlight, this is what's necessary for compliance. And I think one of the things that we all have to remember when we go back 8 years, and one of the first presentations that the Department of Justice did for the COAB was specifically state the settlement agreement is a floor. It is not a ceiling. I don't know I don't know how many people actually remember that statement, but to me, it was an impactful statement because there is more to go. The PPB can do more things. That just because you've substantially complied with the settlement agreement doesn't mean that you are a leading police agency. So what we've really done is we have said, here is what's needed for substantial compliance. Here is what's the bare minimum that you need to meet a legal document. However, here is all of the information that you can use to grow as an agency. Here's all the information that you can use to improve yourself, and setting up the systems for PPB to self-monitor and to self-audit. And so that's really where I see the distinction of compliance assessments and technical assistance. Now, there have been instances where we've provided technical assistance to say, if you continue going down this path, there's going to be a problem, and it likely will lead to a compliance issue. We've made that very clear in the past. In some respects, it's come true for some instances. In some respects, PPB has taken the steps needed to avoid it. So that's an instance where there was technical assistance, but the technical assistance was, you really need to be on the lookout. This is going to lead you somewhere bad. And that's, I think, where we've taken that approach, where, again, compliance assessments are needed to meet the letter and the intent of the agreement. The technical assistance is to make sure that PPB never has to come under federal monitorship again.
Thanks, Dr. Christoph. Dr. Rosenthal?
Sorry, took a little bit to get the unmute there. So yeah, and my question or my answer is actually not very different than Dr. Christoph's. In fact, I mean, very similar. Obviously, you do look at the settlement agreement, and it talks about, it actually gives a definition of what substantial compliance is, that, violations are minor, they're not systemic, and it's actually a very practical definition of what substantial compliance is. Certainly in my work in Cleveland, that has been a big part of what I've done, is providing the technical assistance, particularly for me in the areas of accountability. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to include Dr. DuPont in this conversation, this team, because he did develop the Memphis model. And I think, as I heard, Dr. Christoph was one of his graduate students at the time, but he's also been working beyond that and been working to adapt it to the current day. And the Portland Street response is, that team is an iteration of that kind of crisis intervention work that he's been doing. But that's what we're looking at. So Dr. DeAngelis can provide technical assistance with respect to data. Dr. Clemens can provide technical assistance with respect to outreach. I can provide technical assistance with respect to accountability. Dr. DuPont into crisis intervention, all of us with respect to training. And it is, it's an integral part of all of it, because when you're acting in this capacity and issuing a report card on whether or not you're in compliance, you have to help them understand what it takes to get to compliance. And that's part of what why I put together the team I did, is because I think we have the capacity to do that. But there are distinct differences between us providing technical assistance and them complying, because in essence, in large part, sometimes it requires that they take the technical assistance. Sometimes they won't. Sometimes they'll go another direction and they can still come into compliance. And that is actually one of the most important things, is that, to be able to step back and be objective and not just assume you have all the answers and that you're right on every occasion. You do the best you can, you give the best advice and consult you can, and then you let them move forward and you evaluate how well that's worked and whether in fact it's in substantial compliance with the settlement agreement.
Great. Thank you both. While we are coming into the home stretch of our meeting here, we're down to the last 20 minutes or so. I don't have any questions right now that are open, so I'll ask our attendees to please feel free to drop questions in the Q&A or raise your hands, and we'll be sure to address those. I guess what I would do maybe at this point while we wait is ask each candidate to maybe see if there's a question we haven't asked that you'd like to speak about in this conversation, an issue maybe where you see unique qualifications for yourself in this circumstance, or something that you think maybe is important for the community to know about you as we make this decision. And Dr. Rosenthal, I think you're up, so I'll start with you.
So actually, I feel like the questions have been quite good and comprehensive. Excuse me. And maybe I'll kind of go back to what I said at the very beginning. And, I read Dr. Christopher CNA's submission, and I think it's very robust. I think it could serve the community and the city well. I did note, however, it's very expensive and it's basically an independent monitoring team. So it just seems to me that this is a great opportunity for the city to decide what direction it needs to take. And I can honestly say that if the city decides that the CNA team would better get the city into compliance and that it's worth the money, then by all means. I think all of us on our team have more than enough work to do elsewhere, but we were just excited about the prospect of trying to make this particular settlement agreement work, particularly in Portland. And if on the other hand, you're feeling like, it would be good to have some new eyes, to have a new team come in and stand back and do the environmental scan and meet with everyone and then figure out the best ways to move forward, then we stand ready, able, and willing to do so. And I can say that, Dr. DeAngelis is prepared to put away a good portion of his teaching. Dr. DuPont has already figured out a way that he can do this and put real eyes on Portland with respect to how he's working with other cities. As I said, am prepared to spend a significant majority of my time on Portland. I I did not spend a lot of time in Portland in the sense that I left after 4 years. I can tell you I took my family kicking and screaming from Portland. I always wanted to come back in one way or another. We really did fall in love with the city, and in some ways coming to Vancouver was kind of, it was very similar. We've got a very similar kind of culture up here to what exists in Portland. But you know, if we can help the city get in compliance, help the community have faith in the police bureau and the work they do, and ensure sustainable, constitutional, and effective policing, I would be thrilled to help do that. And if, in fact, the CNA team you believe is a better way to go because of long-term needs, happy to help in any way we can on the sidelines.
Thanks, Dr. Rosenthal. Dr. Christoph, and then I see Gloria has a hand raised, so I'll call on her next.
I was going to say, I don't mind deferring the comments if Ms. Gloria wants to go, or I can give a quick comment now.
What? Yeah, why don't we go ahead and have you answer the question, and then we'll switch gears over to Gloria.
Sure. So I'll be fairly quick. I think one of the things that I really wanted to highlight that I don't know that we've touched upon is what I've kind of learned over the last 8 years. And I think the biggest thing that I learned is we can be successful in this settlement agreement. Like I said, in 2019, based on the recommendations and the technical assistance that we had provided, DOJ found the city and PPB to be in substantial compliance. You know, like I said, I know that we fell out. However, we can get there again. I still look at this work as, you know, we can do it. And this is where I really attempted to expand the team. And so there is a budget increase compared with the current COPL team. But again, I want to really highlight where that budget increase is being allocated. A large majority of that budget increase is going to community engagement, because that was an area that we needed additional focus. Additionally, we've brought in two individuals who can help with the force review. One individual whose primary focus will be looking at the force review and PPB's use of force, and in order to better be able to bring that force evaluation and the entire system of force review into substantial compliance. We've also expanded by bringing in somebody who will be focusing on the accountability system based on his experiences with investigations. So that right now is a current area of deficiency from the Bureau and from the city. So where that expansion has really happened has been very purposeful in terms of identifying the main issues right now and being able to attack those and bring those really into substantial compliance. So again, I know that we can do this again, and this is really where that expanded team has come from, and this is really where that approach will be geared towards going forward.
Thank you, Dr. Christoph. Gloria, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Dr. Rosenthal, Dr. DeAngelis, Dr. Clemens, and Dr. DuPont, I really appreciate what you had to say. And I came away with several questions, but I'm going to narrow it down to just one. You said that within 1 year period of time, you're hoping to bring Portland into compliance. Is that realistic?
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
going
go ahead. I'm sorry.
to give you time to think about it, because I had another question for Dr. Christoph.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. No.
Okay.
I can. Yeah. Let me go ahead and just hit that. So I think what I've been saying is I'm not promising. We can't promise to bring this bureau into compliance within 1 year. And I must admit when I did have a chance to really start looking deep into what was going on, I was very disappointed because I know the city was in compliance at one point, and then to see how far the Bureau fell out of compliance was actually quite disappointing. What I think what I was trying to say is I'm committed to the idea of trying to do this with the COCL concept, with the concept of community engagement and a smaller team getting them there. And I would note that they got there already with that smaller team. Dr. Christoph was talking about the need to enhance the monitoring team in community engagement. And then my question would be, well, why can't we do that? If city money needs to be spent in that way, why can't we have the city do that? Why can't we be, in our limited role, doing what we need to do, but really give the city the ability to, and in order to sustainably go forward, create the positions that are necessary to achieve compliance. So what I'm trying to do, and I must admit, this is a bit comes from sort of the academic perspective, is that when I compared all the consent decrees and the settlement agreements throughout the country, Portland stood out. And I didn't get a chance. I almost wanted to change the focus of my dissertation to Portland because it was so unique and interesting, and I felt like it had such great opportunities. You can't do that. Once you're in your dissertation, you got to finish that puppy. So it was just a tangential part of my research. But when I saw that Portland was advertising for a new COCL, that Dr. Rosenbaum was retiring, I just saw it as an opportunity to try and kind of bring it back and figure out a way to succeed with the model that was created specifically for Portland. But no, I agree. If there were a way we could bring the Bureau into compliance within 1 year, that would be fantastic. And certainly my goal. Is it a realistic goal? Hard to say. I need a lot more information to be certain, but I suspect that obviously it may take more time. Maybe we can bring them in compliance on some key factors and then work again in a more focused way later. And I'll point out in Seattle, what they've recently done right on there's a motion set in federal court on May 30th or May 31st to switch their consent decree to a compliance agreement. So that they're trying to get it really focused on the key areas where Seattle has had problems with compliance and then dismiss the rest. And so for Seattle, that seems to be something that may very well work quite efficiently for them. But again, focusing on what's important, that's really what I'm hoping to do.
Okay, Stephanie, my last question was for Dr. Christoph, and it was just, he mentioned that he was going to be putting money into the community engagement. He doesn't mean that he's going to have specific programs in the community. He means that he's going to be hiring 2 people. And I want to know, how big is the team? Because I'm counting a lot. How many people do you have already, Dr. Christoph?
Are you asking about how many people we have on the community engagement team?
No, on your team that will be working, if you are chosen, that will be working with you.
So on our team, we have, give me 1 second.
I counted at least 8.
I believe it's 18. Now, again, I will say that 3 of those new members, 5 of those new members will be part of the community engagement team with some respect. So we have Dr. Holt, Erica Warren, Corey Falls, and as I indicated, Ms. Janie Gullickson and Mr. Kevin Fitz will also be a part of the community engagement team. So it's not just the 3 or the 2, I think you said 2 community engagement team members. We'll actually have 5 people who will be working with the community engagement team.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Gloria. Dan, go ahead. And I'll do a quick time check. We've got 8 minutes left.
Okay, I'll speak as fast as I can. Thank you. Dr. Christoph touched on this idea a little bit. There are some parts of the settlement agreement that are technical and spiritual, but not necessarily as far as what the community would like to see. So, for instance, if you look at the OIR group's reports about shootings and deaths in Portland, the percentage of people in mental illness has gone up since the DOJ came here. That the people who got shot or shot and killed by the Portland police has gone up, even though that's the heart of the agreement has to do with mental illness. And then the other thing is the community invited the DOJ in because of racial profiling has been continuous and the high percentage of people who get shot who are Black in the community. And while the compliance officer has been pointing out that the PPB numbers in terms of racial profiling are disproportionate, the PPB doesn't seem motivated to do anything because it's not literally something they have to do under the agreement. So how can each of you try to bring the voices of the community and these concerns to the Bureau, despite the fact that they're not necessarily required to do the things, and truly use this as a floor, not a ceiling, and encourage them to do more to meet communities' concerns? Thank you.
I think Dr. Christoph, you're up first on this one.
Okay. And Dan, I think when we're talking specifically with OIS events, this is where a decision point analysis really needs to be brought in. And I know that we have talked about decision point analysis, but we really do need to see it focus on, particularly with those events that are the most critical. And again, with the limitation of what we can really say about PRBs and the police review board and the depth of analysis that we've seen, there needs to be more done there in terms of really taking a critical eye on each specific step. This officer then went over here. Was that a tactically smart decision? Was that a decision that would have de-escalated the situation? Is that a decision that raised the likelihood of a violent ending? And so that's really this is for OIS events, because I believe that that's what your question was talking about. We really do need to see that critical eye on every decision point that occurred during that event. And again, that's something that I think that we bring that strength by already understanding the PRB process, by already understanding the current limitations of the PRB, and having informed the Bureau as well as DOJ's assessments as to where the current failures of that decision point analysis are. And once you can take those decision point analyses, and once you can identify issues, then you can look at your policy, then you can look at your training. And that's something that I know that we need to see happen as well, is has the training really been influenced by the decisions of the officers? There's a training component to the PRBs. However, when you're not looking at the specific decision points, that training analysis is therefore limited. And so, again, with respect to those extremely critical incidents, they really need to be broken apart and dissected and looked at from a standpoint of where can we improve? Even if we haven't, this goes back to my comment before about supervision. Even if you haven't violated a policy, where can we improve? And with OISs, that's an extremely important approach to take.
Thank you. And with our last 3 minutes, Dr. Rosenthal.
Yeah, so a couple points. One of the things that I was proudest of as an auditor and a monitor is that when I came into cities, the number of officer-involved shootings was much higher than when I left. And I really did feel at times that we were saving lives. We were putting in training and policies and protocols to reduce the risk of officer-involved shootings and community deaths. One of the things I did in Portland was I brought in at the time was PARC, the Police Assessment Research Center, to conduct audits, regular audits of the investigations and incidents of officer-involved shootings and custody deaths in Portland. And eventually that got turned over to the OIR. One of the issues that I would be discussing with the Police Bureau is it's not just, you know, my role is the settlement agreement, but also I've been a municipal monitor and auditor, you know, for my whole career. The fact that you've commissioned these reports from the OIR, they review, they make recommendations. There's this tendency in policing for them to say, oh yes, we agree with the recommendations, we'll implement them. And then the report sits on the shelf, and 3 years later, the same mistakes are being made, the same problems are occurring. And in fact, the number of shootings goes up. And so in fact, that's really one of the essential points is we've had a lot of reviews and analysis and recommendations. And the Police Bureau needs to track them, evaluate them, train to them, and implement them in order to reduce the risk of this happening. And Dan, I'm going to quote you for the third time, because you said this when you replied, you put a response into the most recent COCO report, I think, and you said, you know, it's less about checking the boxes than it is about producing the desired outcomes in a sustainable way. And you were right. So the way I see it is, you know, the Bureau needs to take a look at it in a more holistic way. And one of the ways they might even be able to do it is if you save money on monitoring, you can actually put it into data collection, analysis, training, policy, implementation, and what have you. And maybe then we actually can get to the ultimate goal of the settlement agreement, which was to save lives.
Well, that is just almost perfectly our time for tonight. I want to say thank you so much to both of our candidates and their teams for submitting proposals, for you know, engaging with the folks on our selection process panels, for engaging with all of you tonight. We are very appreciative of that work and your thoughtful comments tonight and approaches to this. And frankly, for both of you, I think your enthusiasm and positivity towards trying to, you know, bring Portland into compliance and reaching a sustainable goal of that I think we all share and want to see in our policing here. So with that, I think I will say thank you again also to our folks who joined us and submitted questions. We really appreciate that. I will note that there is a public comment process. That window began on April 25th, I believe, and so we will be happy to receive any additional public comment up until May 25th. You can send comment directly to me at my email address if there's anything that you'd like to share feedback on tonight's town hall. And from there, moving through our process, we will notify a top scoring candidate, and a report will be made to council recommending a candidate. And from there, that candidate can move forward to negotiations around a contract. So we again are doing this process understanding that we are losing Dr. Rosenbaum very soon, and so we're moving with urgency through this and recognizing the need to make sure that we've got monitoring and that we can do everything we can to make this a successful period while we continue to make decisions around an independent monitor. So long way of saying thank you so much. We will be in very close touch with you. Anyone feel free to reach out with questions to me, and we'll do everything we can to get you answers. So appreciate everyone.
Thank y'all.
And thank you for your time and for facilitating.
Thanks so much, everyone.